For the benefit of both domestic and international viewers, particularly those of us who are not based in North America, let's acquaint or reacquaint ourselves with the belief system of the Nation of Islam, a black nationalist US political organisation that, to be fair, does have a crack at doing good in communities that need a little nudge along. Only they do it with quasi-Islamic hell and brimstone sci-fi religious vent. The shots on the screen may ring some visual bells. Let's start by indicating, when it comes to modern day religions, the United States can boast to have spawned the entire new top 10. As we go through the theology of the Nation of Islam, formed in Detroit in 1930 by our main character, parallels to these domestic contemporary rivals will become apparent. An easy starter on the contemporary theology front versus the NOI being the dodgy historic claims by the Church of the Latter-day Saints, and that NOI, they believe that American Negroes aren't actually African Negroes, as the DNA would seem to indicate somewhat conclusively. The Mormons are also far from being alone in creating lost tribes and planets the James Webb just can't seem to locate. Black men are part of the lost tribe of Shabazz, Shabazz, or ZZ. I'll save you the trouble from Googling Shabazz by indicating the movie Earth on Avatar is more commonsensical. That thread permeates this entire video. Outsiders will soon notice the Nation of Islam aren't big on DNA, carbon dating and archaeological digs, what we would loosely call facts. That said, they don't have it alone with fantastical claims. The Islamic faith believe, in a show of strength, Muhammad split the moon in two in 622, without anyone else on earth seeing it. Please stick with me here, people. I know none of this makes sense. Moving from this, all modern-day North American Africans were Muslim, which seems like a rather long bow, as the Muhammad, tuck it out from his celestial displays, died a decade later. Christianity, what do they have to say about that? Well, that's the religion for the white devils.
I'm talking to you, whiteys, the skunks of the planet.
Somewhat strange, notwithstanding Jesus was actually a Jew, but I'll get to them shortly. History is also not another strong point. Rather than be a positive influence, Christianity has been employed to subjugate and beat down Afro-Americans, not just other Afro-Americans, which the crime stats say is the case, then to make a South African apartheid regime look like a BLM march in the Bronx. The black race in its or their natural state is or are divine. Raising up to their true godly status can only come about through segregation. Hello? You the bloke on the dark web?
Could be.
I was watching this video from New Zealand on YouTube, and I thought it would be better, if you know what I mean, with some stimulants. What you got? Next up, a toe dip into Scientology, into the migraine-inducing hodgepodge of pseudoscience, thankfully minus Xenu. God willed the universe into being 76 trillion years ago, the white and Jewish astrophysicists having pulled the wool over your and mine eyes with their wildly short 13.8 billion Earth year claims. A trillion being 1,000 billion, it's just to remind you. The black race having been about for 66 trillion of the 76. White race, a mere primal soup in comparison. Been a lab experiment gone wrong by a black scientist called Jakob 6,600 years ago on the island of Patmo, P-A-T-M-O. Sorry, not Patmos, off the Greek coast, although it's clear the creator had read that bit of the Bible about that being the place where John had received his revelations. The newly minted white people immediately went forth and did bad things, like schools, democracy, cars, planes, vaccines, functional sewage systems, the internet, etc. But every baddie needs a sidekick. The one you know will die first in the movie. This leads us invariably to the Jews, the ones that started the Atlantic slave trade, not the capture and corralling to the coast from the interior. That was actually fellow blood brothers. The Jews were also behind the Black Holocaust. Thumbs through a book to find references on a Black Holocaust, finds nothing, instead reads that colonisation doubled the lifespan in Africa. Far from being interested in saving their homeland from the 46 other countries in the world that want it destroyed, Jews have oodles of spare time to spend promoting homosexuality. They are the ones behind those annoying and persistent pop-ups on Facebook.
You too can become gay.
And before I close this good start, the laying of the essential theme of the video, just one more thing. In a precursor to Charlie Manson's helter-skelter reign of terror, a mass extinction process will happen between the varying warring factions of the Caucasian people, who will go to it with gas in 1934. I mean, who could come up with this load of cobblers? And so much, much more. The bloke on your screen, Muhammad, the last prophet after the last prophet, meaning I'm sure to be in for a stoning for publishing his caricature. The original gangster for black nationalism in the US, who wasn't actually a black man, more like an M&M in his chosen field. A gentleman who claimed on more than one occasion he was born in New Zealand. It's time to break open any of those past their expiry date drug bottles you have in the bathroom cabinet. This is the story of Wallace Fard Muhammad. 5 dozen other aliases as well. This isn't the first video I've done where the character is, to say the least, slippery. That first honour went to New Zealand's self-titled King of Cons, Murray Beresford Roberts, a man that variously portrayed himself to his victims as a professor, lord, brain surgeon, newspaper editor and archbishop, to name but a few of his false identities. Still, Roberts we know a lot of substantive detail on. We don't need to take his word for things like his childhood, roughly where he was in any given year, his parents' schooling, etc. In adulthood, one just needs to look in the court pages in Australasia to know 100%. Even when we follow these sort of lines here, for example, the police records of a man calling himself Wallace Fard or Wallace Fard, etc., having in our hot little hands a fairly damning holiday snapshots from St Quentin Prison, 1926, with name, age, place of birth, the sort of info one would think the police forces would be interested in, being the identity of someone going into your jail for assault with a deadly weapon. None of those details are correct. Scrape the surface and we soon find, from the moment he arrived in the US in 1903, we are chasing breadcrumbs. You play Hansel. Far greater and better resourced historians than myself have tried to establish Farad's background. Add to this the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They've all gone down dead ends. A good start to any investigation pre-USA would be his name. Make that real name. Ones on birth certificates, passports, that sort of thing. I took it upon myself to chase up the 2 widely employed pre-Muhammad names on the net, the church's official celebratory birth date. I then contacted the local births, deaths and marriages department here in New Zealand. I also made inquiries as to any Farads or Fards born in this time frame, and I drew a blank. Mind you, I did only use 2 of his known names. Let me read out a sample of some of the others. If you have a rubbish bin to put out, you have time to leave the video going, drop the bin outside, and still not lose the flow.
Muhammad Wali, Allah, one Allah, W D Fard, W D Farad, Ali, Ali F, Walker Ford, variants of the Christian name Wallace, spelt, say, W-A-L-L-I or W-A-L-L-I-E, Muhammad ending in an AD or an ED, Farad with one R or two Rs, Farad ending in an ED, middle name Don used as the primary without the Wallace in front of Farad or Ford, the standard sounding Fred Dodd and George Farr, and to the out there and highly novel W.F. Muck Muck.
Do I really need to continue? There are way more. Thus, anyone chasing his real name ends up chasing phantoms, his name of the week. Perhaps his date of birth could improve the chances of internet detectives. Take your pick, people. These are the list of dates he provided on varying US official forms like the World War I draft card. In the census of 1920, Wally D Fard, spelt W-A-L-L-I-E by the way, declared his place of birth was New Zealand, tying in with the 1894 on the screen. It would have become patently clear to you by now, though, he made things up as he went along. Aided by officialdom at the time that didn't have the capacity to follow up, the official church line was he was born on the 26th of February, wait for it, 1877. Mind you, they also believe the prophet will descend from above in a spaceship. That you?
Could be.
You haven't resent that package yet. Could you please double the order? Next line of inquiry. What say his place of birth? Good luck with that, fella. Time to put the green bin out now at the roadside and come back. Hawaii, New Zealand, Mecca, Turkey, Persia, Jamaica, Bosnia, Albania, Syria, Afghanistan, India, Greece, Algeria, Morocco, Oregon, New York. Please stop, Paul. Okay, I will. Getting back to the New Zealand connection, his quixotic claims, some recounted via his common law wife, with whom he had a son, was that he was born in New Zealand of a father who was Pakistani, technically Indian at the time, and had an English mother, and then in the next breath he was of Polynesian extraction, lived with Maori in his childhood. As I've already stated, there were no Farads or Farads floating in New Zealand at the time. A surname like that would stick out like a dog's balls. And put in context, Walter Mitty also told people in Detroit he was born in Mecca. The reason he was of evil Caucasian complexion was his mother having been a Russian Jew. Another explanation to placate his rather European looks, he had Spanish parents, but that was only when the wind was blowing in a westerly direction. Much of what we know about the Kiwi links come back to his wife. Also, statements made by his Michigan mistress, those were subsequent to him vanishing off the face of the earth, last seen boarding a flight to Chicago in 1934, effectively having been given, if you know what's good for you, you'll leave, mafiosa type message by the Detroit police and unhappy authorities. The bit on the side said he was going to disappear to New Zealand, or was it Australia? Geography is not normally a strong point in America. This is therefore a man of mystery, a man we don't even know his real identity, real name, birth date, place of birth, where or when he died. Let me now have a crack at ethnicity, put some runs on the board, be brave. In 2017, I backpacked through Iran and Azerbaijan with Mrs. Fings. That's me with the AK. Farad or Farad is of course a Middle Eastern name. Facially, he would certainly fit in with the ethnicities you see in this region of the globe. He also regularly used vernacular like shabazz that seemed to point to more than a new set of encyclopedia. Amongst the Middle-earth stories of his childhood in New Zealand, living with Maoris, he listed the Christian name of his Pakistani/Indian father as Zarid. Every second Pakistani cricket player is called Javed, Zahir or Ali. My stab in the dark was WDF, came from modern-day Iran or Pakistan. The closest we'll ever get to knowing exactly who he was would be the DNA results of his grandkids. Remember, he had at least one child, a son we know about. Ethnicity being about as close as we'll ever get to knowing Diddley. The part of his life that we really do know what he was up to week by week, his time in the spotlight, were those brief years in Detroit. Some of that time was spent in a straitjacket inside a mental facility, before getting red-carded, then disappearing altogether, are intriguing, to say the least, and this needs to be weighed up against the obvious character flaw. He couldn't lie straight in bed at night, and therefore any stories you read about Wallace Fard or Fard, or Walter spelt two ways, Muhammad with 3 Ds and ending with an E with a French accent above it, a separate name on Tuesdays, who mysteriously slipped into NZ in 1935 on an ancient spacecraft aged 33 trillion years old, are just that, stories, fanciful ones at that. Add them to the 1,000-page fictional omnibus being published by a company specialising in fantasy fiction. My last word is to the Nation of Islam Church, and just do good in your community. This is possible without invoking religion. To back your cause, you already have the advantage of being the snappiest dresses on the block. In fact, being nice just for the sake of being nice adds more, street cred. Bye for now.